Hello Year 10 and welcome back to your next living room lessons. Hope you're all well. What you're going to need today for your lesson is your exercise book, a pen and a ruler and your phone. So before we get started, I'll explain what we're doing today. We are going to do our jog your memory as per normal. So 3 quick questions. Give an example of 2 coastal communities at risk from rising sea levels. Name 1 erosion and 2 transportation processes, and give a negative of multinational companies environmentally. So as always, scan the QR code on your phones or click the link and go fill this in so we can see how well you are getting on. Okay, well done with that. So we are moving on today to a new topic because, as you know, we have now finished our coasts topic. And this is the last topic we're probably going to get through this summer. And I'll tell you now, we are jumping around a little bit because obviously the last 3 topics you've done have been theme 2. We've done weather and climate, we've done climate change, and we've done coastal processes. There is a 4th theme 2 topic, and that is rivers and processes, but we've decided to save that until we are back with you because that's quite a complicated one. So what we are actually doing is we're moving on to theme 3 now, which is kind of the environmental geography, and we're going to do one of the topics from within theme 3, which is a bit of a shorter topic, and then we will come back to rivers and the end of theme 2 when we are all back together. So the topic is, as I say, it's called water management and resources. So what I'd like you to do in your books, so you can signal that this is a new topic, is fold a page in half and put big on the folded section, water issues or water management, so you know that this is a new topic we're coming on to now. So we're going to start off today with kind of an introduction to water. Now water, obviously something we all have and use all the time. But it's really important to understand that around the world, there are lots of inequalities when it comes to water. So the title in your books today is Supply and Demand of Water. So please can you all write that in, underlined with a ruler, and we're going to outline today the difference between supply and demand, why different parts of the world have different levels of supply and demand, and then we're going to start to think about water insecurity. So to start with, we obviously on our Earth have 2 natural types of water, naturally forming waters. That made no sense. Good work, me. So we have obviously salt water in our oceans, and then we have fresh water. Big differences between the 2. There's loads of salt water, but we can't drink it for obvious reasons. So fresh water is the one that we are focusing on. So what I want you to think about first is how much of each do we have? I'm sure lots of you know there's considerably more salt water, but do you know how much more? So 96% of the water on Earth is salt water. That means 96% of the water on Earth isn't actually accessible and usable without a lot of money and treatment, which means that's just 4% of the water on Earth is fresh water, is usable water. So the first thing I'd like you to do is just write down salt water, 96%, fresh water, 4%. Maybe do them kind of in the middle of your book, not in the middle of a page, but kind of in the middle, because you're going to be doing a flow coming off them as well. So just very quickly, pause the videos and quickly copy down those numbers for me. Okay, so of that water, of that 4% of fresh water that we're actually able to use, it's predominantly held in 3 different places. So it's held in lakes and surface storage. So that's all water that's kind of on top of the earth. So in lakes, in rivers, in ponds and streams. Some of it is held underwater in the rocks, within our groundwater, we call that. And then some of it is held within ice. Obviously, one of these is the easiest for us to access. So water from lakes, rivers, reservoirs, that is the easiest water to access. But of these 3 things, how much do you think, how accessible do you think, how much of that 4% do you think is in each of these 3 things? So within our surface storage, groundwater and glaciers, so within surface storage, 0.2% of that 4% is in surface storage. 26% of it is underground, and 73.8% of it is in glaciers, in the coldest, harshest parts of our planet. So of that 4% of water, only 0.2% of it is easily accessible. So if you try and work out that maths, which you know I'm not going to be able to do, of that 4%, if only 0.2% of that 4% is easy to access, that is a tiny amount of water that is actually easily accessible for humans. So what I'd like to do next is just under your fresh water, you see like I've done here, we've got a nice little flow chart with some arrows. I want you to write out these other 3 stores of water and the percentage of that water that is held in that store. Okay, so what lots of this comes down to, and the fact that only a tiny percentage of water is actually easily accessible, is it comes down to different places having different levels of supply and demand of water. So supply of water is how much water is actually available. So how much water is easily accessible for people in that area. And then demand of water is how much is actually needed. So ideally, you want the supply and the demand to be equal, that everyone has nice, easy access to water. But if you have a significantly higher supply, than demand, that means that place has got excess water. But the big problems come where you are in places where there is a significantly higher amount of demand than supply. So if there's more water needed, more people are requiring that water than the amount of water that's actually available, that is when we start to have problems. So very quickly, pause your videos and just copy out these two quick key terms for me and get them highlighted. So as I mentioned, in places where there is significantly higher demand than supply, this is where we lead to this idea of inequality. Because we obviously know in the UK, I'm sure lots of you these last few weeks have had sprinklers on your gardens and you've had paddling pools in your gardens. We have greater supply of water than the demand for it. So we currently have got a surplus amount of water, whereas there are obviously parts of the world where they don't, where they have an unequal access to water. They might have considerably higher demand than supply, and people are pushed to taking water from unsafe sources, or they're pushed to having zero water and their ground becoming completely infertile and not usable. So we're going to be exploring a bit throughout this topic, the kind of differences in supply and demand and how that inequality affects places. So what we've got on the board is a map showing you the availability of fresh water. This was in 2000, so it is a little bit out of date, but it won't have changed too much. So the darker the blue colour is the higher amount of water that place has got per capita, so per amount of people. So having good amount of water per their population. And then as we go through down to the yellow and the orange, that is when there is less water per capita, per person. So what I have done is I have written an answer to this question. The question is, describe the distribution of fresh water globally. My response is, water supply is uneven across the world. New Zealand has the most water. Places with no water are in Africa. So, if that was a 3-mark question, I would have got 1 mark for that. It's not the best answer. I'm sure all of you are sat there thinking, oh, Mr. Smith, I can do better. I know what's not very good about that answer. So if we'd pick this answer to a part of it, firstly, this is an okay point that the water supply is uneven across the world, because it is uneven. There's not kind of even patterns of everyone having good access to water. And then I go on to name a specific place that has lots of water, but I've said New Zealand has the most water, which isn't technically true because it's got the same amount of water as Canada and Chile. So actually, to say that New Zealand has got the most water, it has some of the most water, but it hasn't got the most amount. And then to go on and say places with no water are in Africa is a terrible answer. We know that because actually, look at Africa, the continent of Africa. Some of our countries in kind of Central Africa here, so Congo and the Central African Republic, they have got huge amounts of water. So to say there is no water in Africa is a huge generalisation. Need to be more specific. What parts of Africa have got higher amounts of water scarcity? Now, obviously on here we haven't got names of countries, so you will be using north, east, south, west. So what I would like you to do is to rewrite this answer, making 3 simple points, but do it better than I did. So 3 simple points describing the access to fresh water globally. Okay, so as we saw on there, the UK and parts of Europe have got high amounts of access to fresh water. So we're going to break that down a little bit and have a think about how we use our water. So the recommended amount of water that we should be using is 50 litres per person per day. So if you're in a household with mum and dad and 1 sibling, that's 200 litres of water for the whole household in a day, all right? That's recommended in terms of to be sustainable, to not be overusing water, to be kind of protecting our planet. If we look at some of these kind of simple things that we use water for, every time you run a bath, that's 80 litres. So again, we'll go back to a 4-person household. 200 litres, realistically, you can run 2 baths and not a lot else, so you're going to be sharing your bath water. 45 litres for a 5-minute shower, so all 4 of you could have a shower, 5-minute shower, but you can't do much else. It's 50 to 100 litres for a full load in the washing machine. So to run the washing machine, a lot of water. And then 12 to 20 litres to run the dishwasher. Dishwashers actually are quite water efficient compared to what a lot of people think. More efficient than filling up a sink of water to hand wash. So we can already see that of this 50 litre per person per day, you become quite limited on how much water you could technically use. And if we were to break down the water that we do use in the home in the UK, about 35% is for showering and bathing, 30% is flushing the toilet, 20% for laundry, 10% for kitchen and drinking, and 5% for cleaning. So we can see that one of the largest uses of water in the household is going to the toilet and having a shower. So personal care, stuff we can't really get around. But if you think of parts of the world where they don't have good access to water, these things become very challenging for them to even be able to do that bare minimum. So what I'd like you to do next is, in your books, maybe do a little mind map, uses of water, and I want you to start off just by copying these ones down. You don't have to say the amount of water it uses, but having a bath, having a shower, etc. And then I want you to add 3 more things that we in the UK use water for. Okay, so hopefully you've got a mind map that looks a bit like this. I've copied some of the ones from the board up onto here. But other things that we in the UK use water for include gardening, so watering plants, whether that's indoor plants, outdoor plants. We use it for washing cars. And then the big one that we use water for, that people in other parts of the world wouldn't even comprehend, is we use water for leisure. We use it for a good old time. We go swimming, we have paddling pools, we might have a water fight. All of these are uses of water that, you know, they're excessive. Yes, we do them because we have water, but other parts of the world wouldn't even be able to comprehend the fact that we do that. So when we think about uses of water, we break it down into 3 kind of main categories. So there's either domestic uses of water, industrial uses of water, or agricultural uses of water. These are the 3 main kind of uses of water, and all of these things fit under one of those headings. So what I would like you to do next is copy out this key termy match-up-y thing into your books, and I want you to match up the use, so domestic, by its explanation. So which of these best describes domestic uses of water, and so on. Okay, let's go through these then. So domestic uses of water is water used in households. So as I say, domestic uses are all of these things here. Industrial uses of water is water used in manufacturing to develop products, because we neglect that in food production, in production of all materials, a huge amount of water is used to run the machinery, clean the products, etc. And then agricultural is irrigation to water crops and to be drunk by livestock. So any water used in agriculture is anything to do with farming. So in terms of who uses more water, it's quite an obvious one, but between the USA, a high-income country, and Ghana, a low-income country, which one do we think uses the most? It's a no-brainer really, isn't it? So in the USA, they use 1,300 litres of water per day in an average family of 4. So remember when I said the advised amount is 200? In the US, 1,300. Whereas in Ghana, they use 22 litres of water per day in an average family of 4. So we can see that there is a huge inequality in usages of water in different parts of the world. So what I want us to have a think about now is how Hicks and Licks use our 3 types differently. So I want you to make a copy of this table, and I've already started to fill in a few points for you as to how their uses of water domestically differences in a high-income country to in a low-income country. But I want you to use these prompts at the bottom to help you fill in some more ideas. Now you might be able to come up with 2 bullet points in each box, so this table is probably going to be maybe half a page or so, and I will go through some answers in a moment. Okay, so here are some examples. So we'll go through high-income countries first. So in a high-income country, in terms of their domestic uses, they will use more for leisure, such as luxury baths, hot tubs, swimming pools, and they will have a piped supply. So they will have piped water coming straight into their houses, which instantly means they've got better levels of sanitation. Sanitation means kind of the cleanliness of your kind of personal hygiene, so showering, drinking water, etc. Whereas in a low-income country, they will not really have pipe supply. Some places will, but not everywhere is going to have fresh piped water directly into their houses. They might have pipe supply in a central part of the village where people go and collect it from, but it would be rare to have it going directly to their houses, which instantly means that there is less sanitation for them. And they will very, very, very rarely use it for leisure activities. If they could see you with all your paddling pools, I don't think they'd approve. In terms of agriculture, so in a high-income country, we use irrigation, which is where there tends to be pipelines running all around the fields, and that will sporadically throughout the day water the crops without any human kind of interaction. Huge amounts of water is obviously going to be wasted doing it that way, because often more water will be given than it needs, and often these pipes will spray off into all random directions. Whereas in low-income countries, they are going to mainly be watering by hand, which means there's going to be considerably less wastage because they're just going to water when it's needed. Irrigation will still go on if it's raining. So irrigation is just this set cycle. And in terms of industry, that's where it differs slightly, because in a high-income country, we've got better technology. So our industry is probably slightly more energy efficient. So I've said sometimes there, because not always, but sometimes our uses of water in industry will actually include less wastage than in a low-income country, because we've got advanced technology. But also because of our advanced technology, we might be using more water in terms of the type of industry that we're developing. Whereas in a low-income country, because they have less technology, it means that their water usage in industry is probably going to be not so efficient. So what do we think about a high-income country then? This is the last thing we're going to think about today. Sorry, a newly industrialised country. So we've spoken about high income, we've spoken about low income, but why do you think it might be different in a newly industrialised country? So what I would like you to do is just answer these 3 questions in your books in full sentences, and I will talk through them in a moment. Okay, so within a newly industrialised country, their industry and productivity is increasing rapidly. So this means that their water demand is also going to increase rapidly. As more industry develops, they're going to have more need for a higher water demand. And in terms of where we find them in the world, it's kind of a mixed bag actually, because obviously there are some places like Brazil where they have high amounts of water. That's a newly industrialised country. Places like Russia, high amounts of water in these countries. So actually, the demand doesn't necessarily outweigh the supply. Whereas there are also a huge amount of newly industrialised countries which don't have as much water. So places like South Africa, India, China, they've got water shortage problems. So as their demand starts to increase in the kind of industrial sectors, it might mean that the domestic sectors might start to see less water available to them. So that is everything today. Well done. Just an introduction, and next lesson we're going to come a bit more to have a think about water scarcity and the impacts of places not having as much water. So what you should have in your books are sources of water, so the freshwater versus saltwater notes, supply and demand key terms, distribution of freshwater, your uses of water mind maps, your uses of water matchup, the differing water uses tables, and some notes on newly industrialised countries. Well done, Year 10. Brilliant, as always, I'm sure, and I will see you all very soon.